I'm Jim Csek. You're watching Now Media. With me, Chris Fluery, Charter Advocates Canada. You're one of the lawyers representing Jeff Evely. We interviewed, I think it was last week, and he got that fine for $25,000 plus another, I think, $3,800 or something and change for victim services and some taxes, I guess.
That's absolutely right. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Yeah, the exact number, $28,872.50 to be exact. And he wanted to get that fine. He actually called them, said, I'm going out there because he wanted to make a case for this. And so are these fines of $28,000, because it's a little bit different than one of the other Atlantic provinces that are, giving out a fine like $172, which you would think that, if you're going to put out some kind of ban, that would be a more reasonable fine. But these fines are meant to be, financially ruining, no, for some people?
So I'll just back up a little bit, Jim. People may not know this, but Jeff Evely, the reason that he went out and got the fine, it's not just because he thinks that the law is so unreasonable, which it is, but there was a similar law that was, or I should say proclamation, that was put into force in the summer of 2023 in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Evely actually challenged that law. And he did it himself. He did it without a lawyer. And he ended up getting kicked out of court on the basis of standing. And what the court said was that you do not have standing to bring this this judicial review because you're not uniquely affected the way that you're affected the same way every other Nova Scotian would be. And what they said was that what would give you standing is if you in fact incurred a fine. And he didn't get to court in that case until almost a year. I think it was over a year later. And so by the time this came around again, Jeff said, okay, I guess I'll have to get the fine in order to challenge this. And that's exactly what he did. It's out of hand in terms of the $25,000. The idea that it captures activities which we all know don't start fires. If there were a $25,000 fine for having a campfire during a ban when there's a serious risk of starting a wildfire. In Nova Scotia, it's common to burn blueberry fields. That's part of the process of farming blueberries there. Those start fires all the time. It's those sorts of activities which are, I would say, properly subject to a $25,000 ban. But the idea that you go into the woods for 90 seconds and walk out, which is what he did, it's completely disproportionate. So for example, a common fine under the criminal code would be impaired driving. In most cases on a first offense, notwithstanding that that's pretty serious criminal activity, you're talking about a $2,000 fine, something in that range. Just looking at, as you mentioned, it's over $28,000.
Yeah, so they just pick an arbitrary number. It's meant to scare people, I take it. And then, a lot of these, I'm guessing, don't stand up in court. We've seen that with COVID when they were handing out these massive fines. And then when they finally got to court and 2 or 3 years later, they were all thrown out. But it does, and it was used in the trucker, the Freedom Convoy, when they were freezing bank accounts and all that. But these fines, how do they get away with making fines at this level? Is it just something they can just make up and then they just let the courts test it?
That's I can't speak to their decision-making process in terms of where they come to these numbers. It certainly sounds like they're pulling it out of their hat, or that they're just trying to come up with a number.
Pulling it out of somewhere, right? Pulling it out of somewhere.
They're trying to come up with a number that is going to dissuade most people, that most people don't have $25,000 in their back pocket to pull out and pay this fine. So I think that their hope is that it's going to dissuade most people from even doing anything that's going to come within the realm of going near the woods. There are protections under the Charter for cruel and unusual punishment, for essentially there are constitutional principles that things cannot be arbitrary and disproportionate where they engage your liberty interests. So those are certainly going to be questions that are raised as Mr. Evely fights this. But you're right, now the battle is essentially in the courts, that they've passed this proclamation. it is a political question, but it's about to become a question for the courts as well.
Do you think it even makes it to court, Chris? Like, do you think that, by the time this is over and I doubt if the government of Nova Scotia actually wants to go to court, because then if they get it thrown out, then they won't be able to do it again. Will they be able to kind of like just throw it out or just drop the charges prior to getting to court?
The Crown has a lot of discretion, and one area that they have discretion about is whether or not to continue with charges. So it's completely up to the Crown in terms of whether or not they proceed. I'll tell you that I dealt with a number of Quarantine Act cases during COVID, and what happened there, and I guess part of the background is that with those cases and with this case, it's not, these are not criminal code offenses. So they don't proceed through that normal system. They proceed through an expedited system where in Ontario, it's called the Provincial Offences Act. In Nova Scotia, it's called the summary offenses, or it's called a summary offense. And essentially a person, they get a ticket, they fill it out, they get a court, they bring it back to the court saying that they plead not guilty, they get a court date. And in most cases, say you get a speeding ticket and you're going to have a trial on it, the trial takes 10 or 15 minutes. That the officer shows up, basically
Right.
says he calibrated his machine and he pointed it at you and you were speeding and then he pulled you over, blah, blah, blah. You're convicted within 15 minutes. As soon as we start raising constitutional arguments like we did in that Quarantine Act case that I was mentioning, the timeline for trial expands to something like at least a week, and the Crown is looking at it like, well, we can prosecute 1,000 traffic tickets in that time. We're not going to throw out 1,000 traffic tickets just to prosecute these guys who violated the Quarantine Act, and then they eventually withdraw the charge. And it's excellent for our clients who, in that case, were facing $5,000 plus fines, but the government ultimately escapes accountability because there's no charter application that's brought. Obviously, if the charges are withdrawn, we can't do that. It's possible for something similar to happen in Mr. Evely's case. One thing that we're doing, though, that is gonna, it hasn't been filed yet. We're going to file a judicial review as well, which is going to, it will prevent the Crown from, they can still withdraw the ticket case, but they will not have the choice to simply withdraw the judicial review. He will be the applicant in the judicial review. It would be up to him to withdraw it. There still are, I would say, procedural hurdles there that they may argue mootness if it doesn't actually get to court by the October ending of the proclamation. But there are a couple different points at which we're striking at this, and I'm hopeful that it will eventually get to court, that this decision will be adjudicated by a court.
Yeah, Jeff sounds like he wants to get to court. And are there precedents out there that back the government for these extraordinary fines? Like, even in BC, we have a nurse that's being given a $90,000 fine for a social media post, and a week suspension. We do lots of stories on nurses that actually hit patients and stuff like this, and they get no fines and they get like a week suspension. So it like what you said, it seems disproportionate as to what these things are. Like impaired driving, all these things, and a lot of people on X have put out tweets showing all these different things, and then $28,000 for walking in the woods, $90,000 for a social media post, and then it seems like like during COVID too, these fines were extreme. But if you look at cities, municipalities, when they put out their bylaw fines, they don't do that. I mean, they don't say like if you throw litter on the street, there's a $100,000 fine, because they wouldn't be able to get away with it. So I guess I'm asking, are there precedents that support them for doing these very large fines?
Well, I'll come back to it captures such a broad range of conduct. So again, if you're doing something that truly starts a fire, I'm not aware of a precedent, but I just instinctively have much less sympathy for that person, and I can see how the fine would be justified if
Right.
there's
But they've
something
caused damages too, right? They've caused actual
right,
damage.
right, and if it's something that really is endangering the public safety in a real concrete way, then that's sort of one situation. But if we're just talking about walking in the woods, you're asking if there's a precedent for imposing a $25,000 fine for walking in the woods because your um, hiking shoes might start a forest fire somehow. It's just, I'm not aware of any precedent like that.
And I can't remember which Atlantic province, I think it was Newfoundland, their fine is $172.50. So couldn't you just say,
That's
hey, we're in Canada, $172, same infraction, and then over here, $28,000.
Yeah, that's New Brunswick, I believe, and we saw something similar in COVID, where I practice in Ontario, so I was very familiar with the a lot of the COVID cases in Ontario, and I was acting for people all over the province, and we would see prosecutors taking, uh, I would say, radically different approaches to these tickets. That in one jurisdiction, they'd simply just be withdrawn. The Crown would say it's no longer in the public interest, and in another jurisdiction, you'd be talking about literally the exact same person doing the exact same thing, but going one jurisdiction and then going, say, 100 kilometers east or west, and they're in another jurisdiction, and you're talking thousands of dollars in fines. It was never $25,000, but you're talking substantial fines.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of these policies, especially when they make up these policies. I mean, even in British Columbia, they're doing some stuff with Airbnb, $1,000 a day, and all these things. So they're very punitive, and I imagine most of them are just to get people to toe the line. But I guess getting into court would actually help set some precedent for these unreasonable fines. Would that be the case?
It absolutely would. I mean, what we're really focusing on in terms of defending Mr. Evely in the court proceeding, the quantum of the fine and the fact that it's completely disproportionate is certainly one aspect of it. Um, Fundamentally, it's a claim under Section 7 of the Charter that it's infringing his liberty interests. He can't go and walk in the woods, and he's subject to under the Forest Act, actually 6 months imprisonment. So it's um, potentially much worse than even a $25,000 fine. That's the minimum fine. That the maximum fine for an individual is $500,000, and the maximum period in custody is 6 months, and that's for each day. So what we're arguing in court is that it engages his liberty interests, and it's not what's called in keeping with the principles of fundamental justice. So those are established constitutional principles, including, for example, it cannot be overly broad, which I've already sort of laid out a little bit, and it also cannot be vague. And that's another aspect to all of this, that the woods, it's defined in the legislation, but it's defined in a way that actually expands the definition beyond what you might actually think. And what Mr. Evely would say, and I think he's right on the money on this, is that Nova Scotia is the woods. Anyone who's been to Nova Scotia knows that you can't travel from one place to another without going through what is a forest or the woods. That's the vast majority of the province is wooded area. And does it mean that if you go sort of into an area where there's 3 trees, is that the woods? Is it 4 trees? Is it 5 trees? Do you have to go 1 tree deep into the woods to be into the woods? Mr. Evely has a park that I believe he said this on social media, that he has a park that he usually goes to walk his dog. And in 2023, there's one area that's roped off. In 2025, there's another area that's roped off. But it's the same proclamation. It's the same wording. It's the woods, and we don't know how to define that. The courts never defined that. The legislature hasn't defined that, and people need to know how to abide by the law if they're going to abide by the law. So that's another aspect of the legal challenge.
I understand a few people have gotten these fines. Are you representing more than Jeff, or is it just Jeff right now, or?
Right now, it's just Mr. Evely.
Okay. So, do you have a court date yet, or you filed the judicial review? Do you have any dates yet?
No. So the judicial review hasn't been filed yet. It should be filed in the next couple days. The ticket case, if I can call it that, The procedure for that is that the police have to file the ticket with the court, which I phoned the court yesterday actually, and it has not been filed with the court. They have until, I believe it's September 12th to do that. And then what we have to do is file a notice of intent, which is basically a piece of paper that says that Jeff pleads not guilty and he wants a trial. After that, we'll be assigned a court date.
Are there other ways other than a judicial review? Are there ways to force the government of Nova Scotia into court on Jeff Evely's behalf?
No, the primary way would be to get a ticket, which he's done,
Yeah.
which he can fight it. There's two proceedings we're talking about, and both of which are valid ways to fight the proclamation. I'm just trying to think through if someone could file a civil action. The judicial review is probably the fastest and most efficient way to proceed, though.
Yeah, I imagine he could file an action against some of the media that's been painting him as a very bad person, but that's for somebody else to worry about, right? Anything else you want to add?
No, thanks so much for having me, Jim. I really appreciate it.
We'll be watching this and with interest to see if the province drops the ticket there. I imagine they will. But the judicial review obviously is something they can't drop, so that'll be interesting as well. Thank you for your time, Chris, and we wish you the best.
Great, thanks so much.
And thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding,